Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I'm here for your weekly forecast for the week of March 18th through the 24th. This week is the busiest week of the lunar month. We just entered the first quarter phase, which means we're in between the first quarter moon to the full moon on Saturday. And so this is the week of the month where all the momentum is building. Things are off the ground, things have started happening. The stage is set, and we're going to see how we're building up to things. So, the point of culmination is our first eclipse of a two eclipse season. The first one is on March 25th, so it's going to happen a week from today, and that is going to be a full moon lunar eclipse. Now, this lunar eclipse occurs at 5 degrees of Libra. It is the culmination of last fall's October 14th Libra solar eclipse that happened at 21 degrees of Libra. So, right, this is a turning point for whatever that storyline was about. This is, we've tested a hypothesis to its end. We've put everything that we can put into something, and now we kind of see what we were able to accomplish, what we weren't, and how that sets the scene for what's to come. So we will have that eclipse, right? And that, lunar eclipses are always going to be, there's drama to them because they involve full moons. And so there's a lot of tension in full moons. And what happens with a lunar eclipse is that, right, we've got the moment of the peak tension between the sun and the moon, 180 degrees apart. And then the moon goes, right? For a moment, the natural order of things is interrupted and the moon disappears from the sky. And so, right, effectively, if we think about part of the power of the sun and the moon is how much light they have, right? If the moon loses all of its light because it goes into shadow, effectively, that tension that was at its peak, it's like if you were in the middle of a tug of war and everybody on the opposing team disappeared, right? Or when you stretch a rubber band and then you let go of one side of it, right? It throws things off balance. And then, right, I mean, pretty quickly in the cosmic order of things, the moon pops up, but there was a moment where it was gone. There was a moment where we got some kind of clarity or some insight or some interruption of that tension. And that moment is like a lightning bolt that lights up our current situation just for a moment. But, right, the whole thing is illuminated and we can see the reality of the forces at work. We can see where we're getting in our own way. We can see what the actual problem was. And so it is in that way that eclipses can be these turning points. And often, I think for the majority of us, eclipses work in that insight-oriented way. They come with a realization that change the way that we relate to what we're trying to do. And that's really what the nodes and the eclipses are about. They are about what we are trying to do, where we are trying to pull energy from and put it in somewhere else. We are trying to rebalance. But the paradox, the parable of the nodes is that they'll never be in balance until you connect them, right? They think that they are at odds when actually they are the head and the tail of the same problem. And the only thing that will satiate them is, right, bounding time in eternity. And so, right, we're trying to create balance with this Libra eclipse, especially because it's a Libra eclipse. We're probably not going to get it right. And that is why time keeps moving forward so that we can try and solve these things, that it is not in the realm of possibility to totally solve, but so we live through these stories. And so in a week, we have an eclipse that will change the story. 2 weeks after that, we'll have a new total solar eclipse that will definitely change the story. And so we're headed in there. So there's a way in which I think, especially in the next week, we start feeling the like mechanisms of fate at work. We start hearing the deeper themes of things happening. And the more we kind of listen and attune ourselves to those, the deeper they can take us on, this weird and wonderful road that we walk in our lives. And this week is really like the first act in some ways, because it's going to set a bunch of stuff up. So first off, Monday, we have Mercury enter the shadow of its retrograde. Now, last week, I talked a lot about this retrograde and traced the full arc of it and did the whole theme. So if you're interested in the kind of nitty gritty of this Mercury retrograde and how it plays in with eclipses, go back and watch last week's forecast, or go to my Substack and you can listen to the audio podcast. So Mercury enters the shadow of its retrograde. So what that means for us is that the themes that come up now, the problems that we encounter in the next week, the things that we have to kind of walk around, they are sure that we will have to double back to them. So we will be able to see the roots of the heart of this retrograde in the stuff that comes up this week. And more so until the end of March, because Mercury stations retrograde on April 1st. Tuesday is the spring equinox, and the sun enters the sign of Aries. So this is a joyful day. The sun is exalted in the sign of Aries, right? And that is because, well, they're connected in this way of the sun can express its true light in that way. And right, this represents the light half of the year. We're heading into the light half of the year, and Aries is like that triumph of light over darkness, right? There is something instead of oblivion, right? And that has the energy of Aries. We want to do stuff. We want to accomplish stuff. We're mission driven with the sun in Aries. And now that is going to be especially complicated this year, but part of the kind of urgency of Aries in this season is going to be, not the strategy of with normal Mercury retrogrades of like waiting to see what happens and moving more slowly. It's going to be about staying nimble. And so the sun brings us into Aries season. We're going to want to take action. I think that we should do it. You just don't want to get in a situation where you're tied down to a certain plan because the plan is going to change. We also have, let's see, Thursday, Venus conjoins Saturn. And so that is a kind of deep commitment. And I think that, while Venus has been in Pisces for a couple weeks now, we haven't been able to experience full, true Venus in Pisces because she's been approaching this conjunction with Saturn. So this conjunction with Saturn is really about where are your values? And I think Venus-Saturn connections are so beautiful for their capacity to deepen our commitment. And sometimes that looks like having to choose, having to use our Saturn thing to create some kind of discernment about what we truly value, Venus. So there can be a choice there. You might go back on it because Mercury's in the shadow. But also, I think that Venus and Pisces should lighten up and be a little bit more helpful after Thursday. On Friday, Mars goes into Pisces. So we have Mars in the water sign, and this is one of our kind of key placements for these eclipses because Mars, Mars is not in charge of the Libra eclipse, Mars is the ruling planet for the Aries eclipse. And Mars is going to be approaching this conjunction with Saturn, this more brutal choice of like, what do we have to sacrifice is much more of the Mars Saturn than the Venus Saturn. But the Venus Saturn is going to show us what it is that we value in there. And then Mars Saturn, which we won't get to until April, but we'll start to feel as soon as Mars goes into Pisces, is going to have to sacrifice something. That feels really harsh. Luckily by Sunday, we have Venus in Pisces in a sextile with Jupiter and Taurus. That's a really lovely, really kind of buoyant. It's really gonna like kind of lift us up towards the end, right? They're in mutual reception. Venus is in Jupiter's sign, Jupiter is in Venus's sign. They're both are friendly, generally helpful planets. And so I think, right, it's going to be active, it's going to be frenetic. We're leaning into the eclipses with all of the crazy dreams and coincidences that accompany them. But we've got this kind of auspicious connection right before Monday's eclipse that happens right at midnight. So it's really Sunday night's eclipse. That's what we got. You will, I am sure, have a busy week. I hope it is filled with curiosity and questions and searching your heart to come to a really profound realization about what you care about with that Venus-Saturn conjunction. And I will see you next week as we enter the eclipses. Thanks, everyone.